Welcome to Nerd Impact, a very special video. Mandalorian Season 2 just kicked off, and we're going to start doing some Mandalorian reviews. We'll probably highlight the story a little bit for each episode, but we're not going to do full recaps. Disson will be joining us here in a little bit, and he'll have his opinions. But until then, Nick, how did you feel about this episode? The Marshal.
I was really excited for this leading up to it. When we got into it, it was just everything that I hoped for.
I was bracing myself for you to rip on it, especially you were like shaking your head. I was waiting for you to be like, "This is not Star Wars."
No, it kept my attention. It kept my attention all the way through. I wasn't. I was happy with all the care they took into it, throwing in the little Easter eggs, tying things together from past Star Wars content.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of Easter eggs, a lot of nods, some really cool ones that we'll get into specifically. If you're watching this video, you very well should have already seen the episode. This is certainly going to have a lot of spoilers involved. But if you didn't and you want to watch it anyway, just in short, season kicks off where season 1 left off. The Mandalorian has been basically told by the Mandalorian armorer that his mission is now to reunite the child with his people. And apparently the best way for him to do that is to find another Mandalorian and kind of follow, I guess, how do they describe it? Like a line of intelligence, or...
Yeah, they said basically, one person knows one thing, and
right,
follow this trail of breadcrumbs to
this trail of Mandalorians.
Yeah.
To Yoda's home planet, apparently.
Yeah.
She did also tell him, or kind of to some extent told him about Jedi, which he appeared not to really have any prior knowledge of. So he ends up back on Tatooine, where he is greeted by Peli Motto, that junker or mechanic who's so fond of Baby Yoda and wants to buy his budded offspring. And when they get there, she's working on... This is our first Easter egg. She's working on a pod racer engine.
Or at least what appears to be a pod racer engine. It looks very similar to the big engines that we saw on the enemy pod racer in the
Episode
race
1.
Against Anakin.
Like Sebulba's?
Yeah, Sebulba.
Yeah, and while he's there, R5-D4, the unsung hero of Star Wars, also pops up. And you can actually... So in Episode 4, he apparently purposely blew his own motivator so that Luke and his uncle would buy R2 rather than buying R5 off of the Jawas. So he blew his own motivator. And did you notice you could see the scorch marks on the back of his head?
No.
Yeah, there's a nice little scorch mark where he blew his motivator.
Yeah, so R5, yeah, he met R2 in the Jawa's little thrift shop type storage thing, and found out that while R2 was messing with R5 to ensure that he can get away with this message from Leia, R5 wakes up during this thing that R2's doing, and he's
kind of like, bro, what are you doing?
Yeah, like, what are you doing? R2's apologizing. He's like, this is what I need to do. And then R5 ends up, rigging the situation so that R2 can get away with this message.
So we get a little R5 in here, a little bit of astromech droid action, and then so the Mandalorian is then off to see to a bar in a foreign town. I can't remember the name of the town, but another town on Tatooine. Takes a speeder over there and asks about if a Mandalorian has been seen here. Well, Peli Motto tells him the Mandalorian was seen there. He goes there and runs into the bartender there, who tells him about that the Marshal there. Disson has joined us here. I'm just going to finish what I'm saying before he jumps in. Hold on, let me turn down your volume here, Disson.
You mean the one that got away?
Okay, speak now.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, I'm not recording you yet.
Oh, okay, well.
So just to quickly get through this short little recap before we get to our feelings, he meets up with the Marshal, who is wearing Mandalorian armor, which you can see is obviously Boba Fett's, which we'll get into later. But he needs to help them take out the Krayt Dragon to get the armor back. They have to also team up with the Tusken Raiders to take out the Krayt Dragon. They do, and then we get a surprise little cameo at the end, which I think we're going to differ very much in our feelings about that cameo.
Absolutely. But first, I gotta say, it was really fun seeing Timothy Olyphant on screen again. I haven't seen that dude in a while. I believe the last time I saw him was The Crazies, and he is much older now. And he is damn good looking. And I think he did a really good job playing the Marshal.
Well, we also discovered that you have to be very careful about whether you're talking about Timothy Olyphant or gotta have
Josh
myself
Duhamel.
or Josh Duhamel, because they're freaking identical.
They are pretty similar.
It's beyond similar.
I think it's also how they made him up in this. Mm-hmm. I'm used to seeing Timothy Olyphant a little more shaven, and that's where you can really tell a difference between them.
See, me and Nick actually discovered that we were never aware that they were two different people at all.
Oh, wow. There you go.
And after surfing the internet a little bit, it looks like a lot of people were not.
Gotcha. Well, the more you know. I thought he did a very good job playing the Marshal. I liked the story of how he came across a very run-down Boba Fett's armor. Mm-hmm. And I say run-down because you can see in various shots, like, makeshift tubes going from, tools on it that would indicate, it was damaged. I liked the little chuckle moment when Pedro Pascal is all like, hey, you might want to get out of here, and he just whacks the back of the jetpack and sends him flying. Little nod to how Boba Fett died in Return of the Jedi.
You mean how Boba Fett didn't die in Return of the Jedi?
Well, we'll get into how that is. I liked getting back into this world that felt, like it was a big universe again. Even though the last season ended on Tatooine, this one brings us right back to Tatooine. That never felt like a big issue in The Mandalorian. It's just it's a planet where people go sometimes. But the best part of the show was that it felt big. It introduced us to a whole slew of new characters from different walks of life, who had their own stories, motivations, and things like that. That's the good stuff. Now, I want to revisit the first season a little bit to see if this was an issue back then. But there was something a little off about the dialogue in this episode. Everyone spoke very long form, and I'm not sure if they did that in the first season so much. Like our Mandalorians talking to, the seedy, criminal dude in the boxing arena. And the dude who has like this like Ayo Gambino voice is like,
well, do you know who that was?
No.
John Leguizamo.
That was John Leguizamo.
Yeah. He was
I should have known. It looks like John Leguizamo.
Gor Karash.
Gotcha. Well, Gor Karash had this kind of talk to him, and every character spoke like this season, where they were like, I have searched far and wide to find you, and I will find you again. It was it reminded me of how people spoke in the prequels. And I'm not sure if it was that in your face in the first season, but I noticed it right off the bat this season.
That was never a problem that crossed my mind. I wasn't even aware of it.
I noticed it again when the Mandalorian landed at the repair shop that he had a couple stories in last season, and spoke to that lady again. She was like, I have not seen so many in this part in such a long time.
Peli Motto.
Yeah, I felt like she was a little bit snappier last season in her dialogue.
See, I thought her personality was pretty much the same.
Her personality was the same. I felt like she was written a little different, if that makes sense.
Well,
No one's using contractions. Like, no one's like, yeah, I haven't seen that in a while. They're like, I have not seen that in so many cycles. There was kind of a robotic dialogue this season. But it might have been the same last season, and I just need to get used to it again. Granted, I also, this episode I thought was pretty good. It wasn't my favorite. There were a couple of issues I had with it. But I also look at it the same way as I didn't really like the first episode of last season either. And I think it's just, getting used to how it's written again, getting used to this world again.
So, Nick, there was something that you pointed out. I noticed this in part, but you brought kind of another dimension to it with the speeder that was being used by the Marshal.
Yep, Cobb Vanth's speeder, his speed bike, is actually, or looks to be, a modified engine from Anakin Skywalker's pod racer in Episode 1.
I thought that looked familiar. Yes, it does look like a repurposed engine from
It's got the yellow long
it's definitely
panels.
Yeah, it's definitely an engine from a pod racer. But Nick pointed out if you look side by side pictures, specifically it appears to be Anakin's engine.
Well, I'm willing to allow that. I will let that happen.
I noticed differences, but it does appear to
Been modified.
to be like that's what they were shooting for it to be.
Gotcha.
Like, it wasn't an exact replica.
God, yeah, it was probably that's what I call like a deep cut of fan service. Because who paid that much attention to Anakin Skywalker's engines?
Nick.
I did.
Well,
I noticed all the differences.
Right. Well, okay, but that's a little bit of a deep cut thing because you don't even have to say, "Oh, it's Anakin's." Be like, "Oh, that looks like a repurposed engine from a pod racer," or like the Mandalorian's rifle. That's a deep cut of fan service.
The problem though with the engines is that every set of engines in Episode 1 look completely different.
Okay,
they're not even shaped the same.
Okay. Well, then if they're really trying to be like, man, he just happened to get Boba Fett's armor and Anakin Skywalker's engine, it's a little silly. But I'm willing to let it go because that's such an obscure reference at this point.
Well, if you think about it, there's not a big population on that planet, so where's that equipment going to go? There's not a whole lot of options.
Right, and yeah, I'm willing to let that go, and I'm willing to let go how he came across Boba Fett's armor. Of course, after someone was, eaten by a sarlacc and then blown up when a sand skiff crashed into it, yeah, you can find a lot of shit there. You can find a lot of stuff there. But then something happens at the end of this episode that I was really unhappy with.
Right, so something really great happened at the end of this episode. So Boba Fett was revealed in what looked like it looked like some of his gear was like Tusken Raider gear.
I wasn't really paying a whole lot of attention to the gear that he was wearing.
Nick was just staring at
his face,
trying to figure out who it was.
Because he looked familiar. I just couldn't pin it.
Well, that was I forget his name off the top of my head. Who played Jango Fett in the prequels?
Right.
So, and that's as soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh no. I don't know. Look, he could just be a minor role, shows up for a little fan service and then leaves. That could be it. I think what it does when you start introducing legacy characters, too many legacy characters, is I think it makes the universe smaller.
I'd never understood that argument. I'm not talking about specifically from you, just in general. Because the authors are choosing, I mean, when you tell any story, you're choosing which characters you're following. You're choosing if you're just choosing to follow characters that have all interacted. So the idea of it making the world smaller, it just never really vibed with me.
Well, when everyone's related to everyone and everyone finds everyone and everyone knows everyone, that's a small story in a small universe. That's done the same thing. Every story has been the same.
But it's only because those are the people you chose to follow.
Those are the only people that exist.
But
you can't sit there and say more people exist when they have never even been hinted to exist.
But it's a story.
At this point, you're just
in the background they have.
It's a story, though. You're not supposed to show characters that aren't important to a story, typically.
Yeah.
Right. But you also can't sit there and say, this universe is vast and huge, when we're only ever, for the past, since 1970, whatever, have seen this much of it. And then you sit there and go, oh, there's such a vast thing out there. Well, let's see that. Let's see some more of the disconnected stuff. That's what The Mandalorian has been doing, has been showing us the greater side of things, because we didn't get wrapped up in Jedi shit, other than the little thing with the child being, the same species as Yoda.
Well, also don't forget that the Force is at play in these stories too, and the Force can tie together anything at once.
No, well, the thing is, but the prequels told us the Force is not at play. The Force is just chemicals. It's just microorganisms.
I think you're misunderstanding the prequels. The prequels told us that the way that human beings tap into the Force is through midichlorians. It never said something about what the Force is as a whole.
All right. Well, okay. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you got to... That just takes stakes out of the story then. If it's a mystical power that's controlling everything, then what does any character's choice matter?
But you could say the same about real-life dogmas and religions.
Well, I don't know. I don't particularly like the idea, of bringing in a ton of legacy characters and things, or the idea the Force is at play. I watched The Mandalorian to get away from that. And I understand that doesn't jive with the fantasy vibe of Star Wars. Star Wars has always been about, good versus evil, pretty much. Mm-hmm. Then it looked great.
Well, we did get a lot of
But that dragon looked awesome.
we got a lot of other wildlife in this episode, both new and old. Nick, you want to run through some of those for us?
We had womp rats. We had the crate dragon.
Well, hold on, slow down. What's a womp rat?
I'm not even sure what a womp rat
Well,
is.
describe it.
It looks like a rat.
They look like they're kind of like lizard.
Like an alien rat.
Aren't they also? They're bipedal, aren't they? Or kind of, sort of.
Yeah, they look like they're like little kangaroo rats.
Yeah. Go on.
And then we have. Can you bring the list back up? We have the banthas, which we're all familiar with. The buffalo-looking.
Yeah.
Tatooine.
They're fishing bait for crate dragons.
Yeah, well, in this episode.
Well, in this episode, they were general transportation a few movies ago.
And then we had the mastiffs, the almost like pet dogs that the Tusken Raiders owned.
Oh, little lizard dudes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were talking about how one of the things we learned about the Mandalorian.
Apparently, he knows some nature calls because he was commanding. He stopped Cobb Vanth from firing at the mastiffs, and he did like some massive commands.
Well, yeah. What I was going to say is, I think
Tusken.
Yeah, he was speaking Tusken, because I guess he would have known from just his general journeys that the Tusken Raiders on Tatooine probably domesticated those, so he would have assumed.
I don't know. The sound he made at first sounded less like a language, more like a command that a dog whisperer would do.
Yeah, I mean maybe. I'd have to
you're talking about the mastiffs versus the language of the Tuscans.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It's I thought it sounded more like one was the language and one was like mating calls or nature calls of the mastiffs.
That's very possible. I would equate both of them to just growling at each other. But I also don't pay that much attention to, the exact sounds as much as the context in which they're being done.
Can we not forget the impressiveness of a crate dragon ate a sarlacc?
Yeah, that it's implied that thing ate a sarlacc.
And I really... Oh, no, that sarlacc was blown up. Never mind. I was going to say I have to wonder if it was the same sarlacc.
Yeah, well, I mean, granted, I'm sure some of its body was still there because those things are massive.
Mm.
You go into all the extended universe BS, and they talk about like, oh, they're going to go so far underground and they're really wide. The mouth is the smallest part. So there's a lot that goes into that. The dragon was pretty big too. It was able to tunnel from underground to the top of a mountain in seconds. So even if it's smaller than a sarlacc, maybe it's implied that, it could just tear through one.
Mm. But yeah, so I think that'll do it for our first review of Mandalorian Season 2. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know in the comments below what you thought of the reveal of Boba Fett and what that might mean for the series going forward. Hop over to our Facebook, like and comment on there, and like and comment on our YouTube channel. And until next time,
stay nerdy.